Back to the Power 2 here on College Football Addiction. TJ Pittinger, Cole Thompson, Tom Hannifan here to talk 6 new teams and, well, not new teams, but 6 new teams to us in our off-season kind of breakdown, spring practice talk, all the things. Boys, Easter week, you guys do anything exciting for Easter? You guys do anything fun?
I'm going home to Philadelphia to see some family this weekend, so I don't know if there'll be anything outrageous in terms of our normal routine, but I'll fly home Friday, come back here to Nashville on Sunday. So looking forward to seeing the family. Be a good time.
My wife's family every single year does Good Friday fish fry. So that is a staple around here. So I'm very excited. Her dad makes the best tilapia and catfish out there that you throw into a homemade actual cornmeal style brand. There's hush puppies, there's French fries, there's battered shrimp that is double fried. It's honestly the one thing I look forward to when hanging out with the in-laws. Like, I know, like, my in-laws are great people. I'm not saying that whatsoever. Kind of, but let's pretend I'm not. Anyways, I say that because I enjoy what is this weekend for that specific reason. So, come 12 o'clock on Friday, I'm out.
Oh, he's literally out.
He's literally out.
And now I'm back. It's a preview of what you can expect this weekend. I have a bone to pick with.
His computer did not malfunction. He literally played that bit perfectly.
That was great.
I have a bone to pick with both of you because of what you said off of air. So, ladies and gentlemen, these two shenanigans that I do a podcast with decided to say, exciting teams in the Big Ten. There's nothing sexy about them. And I have to say, how dare you not throw the beauty of what is 4 yards a play of Iowa football just down your throat, nonstop, and defensive performance. Phil Parker did not waste 20 years to be insulted by you two shenanigans. It's a shame that we do not celebrate Big Sexy and what goes on at Kinnick Stadium on Saturdays. That is the sexiest brand of football that you could ever ask for, if we're being completely honest. Iowa football. Nobody does it better than them. 12-9 games is what we expect, and it's what we come accustomed to, and that's what we're going to have.
As the representative of the greatest conference in college football right now, the Big Ten, I can very humbly admit that we are not a sexy conference. A lot of the franchises, programs within the Big Ten don't necessarily make you want to click over to see, oh gosh, who's Minnesota got this week? Did TJ Fleck put a good team on the field? Yeah, like he wins his bowl games. He has a winning season. He'll go 8-4 or 9-3, something like that, a high watermark, maybe of 10-2, depending on how their schedule shakes out certain seasons. But yeah, like I've felt that way about my own school at times. Like, yeah, this isn't really a sexy product, but like we're considered a blue blood program in the grand scheme of things with a handful of national titles in the 1980s. And then you look at the SEC, and the one thing they've done very well as a conference, and we were talking about it off air, adding teams from the Big 12 in Texas and Oklahoma, they've added all the right brands, and they have flashy schools like Ole Miss and LSU, Florida, Oklahoma, Texas, Tennessee. Texas A&M has gotten themselves to be a sexy school again. You can look at a school like Arkansas, Kentucky, South Carolina, Mizzou. Would you describe them that way? No, but the style of play can be flashy, and they always have the ability to evolve over time. Like Kentucky, for instance, had some high watermark seasons not too long ago with Benny Snell. Who knows what they could be under Will Stein as years go by. They could be one of the hotter teams. You never know. So I think the SEC is always, not always, but has consistently over the last at least 10 years had that quote unquote TV sex appeal over the Big Ten. And I'm not even saying that's changed. I think that's still pretty consistent, because when you hear Big Ten, you think of 3 yards in a cloud of dust, play good defense and run the football. And the SEC kind of took on the old identity of the Big 12, where it was, let's score a bunch of points and run all over the yard, but play next to no defense. So it's fascinating how it's evolved.
I would like to do two points, and then we'll get into the show. But first of all, I would like to do a Big Ten sex appeal ranking at some point. Maybe we'll do that next week. Like, And completely G-rated. Like we're putting like Oregon, USC, Ohio State,
It was with a better term than sex appeal.
No, it's sex appeal.
No, it's sex appeal. It's all about that, baby.
Yeah, we do it for. I would do it for Arkansas too. We put Sam Pittman right on
The
the thumbnail.
thumbnail is going to be the power two, and it's just going to say sex. And then, it's not what you think it's going to be.
Blurred out just a little bit, but like you can still tell what the letters are. So first of all, I like to do that. Second, we have talked about this. The SEC was great, not only at football but marketing. Yeah. They were so much better at marketing than any other conference even got close to. I saw Florida State. I saw the ACC when I went a couple of years ago. They have a big poster at ACC kickoff that says, "We play the toughest out of conference schedule of any other conference." And I was like, that's a really good way to tell everybody that you are the worst. Everyone you play is better than you. Like that's a terrible, like whoever thought of this marketing decision was terrible. The SEC did such a good job of, now they were good at football too. So I don't want to make it just, they were good at marketing and they weren't good on the field. But they were so good at speaking, it just means more, or SEC speed, or any of these taglines that it's just different here, or whatever. They were so good at almost like speaking that into existence. Now, they were really good on the field too. I'm not trying to take away from that. They won 7 in a row, ended by some team around here, but I don't remember who. But yeah, they were so good at marketing. And the Big Ten wasn't. Like, I don't think the Big Ten ultimately cared about that. And maybe you could extrapolate that further and say, like, maybe that's why, maybe focuses should have been elsewhere or whatever. I don't know how much that matters from a program to program basis. But the Big Ten has never cared about, we need to market ourselves this way until really realignment. Now trying to go coast to coast, and we'll see if they get down to the Southeast or not. But adding in an Oregon and USC certainly has changed the, sex appeal of the Big Ten. Because
definitely made it more sexy.
Though Kirk Ferentz does it for Cole, he's not doing it for me. Brett Bielema is the one that does it for me. So,
so you got big sexy, I got old sexy. There we go.
Big sexy and old sexy. Let's jump into things today. Let's start with Notre Dame and a team that right now has the best odds to win the national championship. We'll talk a little bit about their spring. We'll talk a little bit about expectations, talk about their win total for the year. Guys, I've said Notre Dame is one of 3 teams that I would be very surprised if they don't make the college football playoff this year because of the conference or lack thereof that they play in, the schedule they play, and the talent coming back. For those that haven't seen the other clips we've done, Miami and Texas Tech are the other 2 that kind of fit that bill. I think both of those teams' schedules work out really, really well, and they both bring back a ton of talent. And so it would be a disappointment if any of those 3 teams, to me, did make the playoff. Notre Dame, maybe the most so. I think they have the least number of traps on their schedule and bring back the most production that I'm confident in. I think CJ Carr could, we'll see how the season shakes out, could certainly be a top 10 pick next year. And if he's not, maybe I'll be a little surprised by that. So, Notre Dame's win total, I don't have it right in front of me. I forgot to ask you guys to pull that before the show, but who wants to start out with Notre Dame?
Tom, you start. I'll tell you the win total when you're done.
I love being combative with Notre Dame fans because they're often very delusional, and especially after last season, it's just so much fun to watch them get riled up. That being said, I have been on the record on this show and elsewhere that I do think they should credibly contend for the national championship this year. I am so excited to see what CJ Carr is in year 2 as a starter because he really progressed nicely through the season to the point that there were some people saying, it's like, hey, he should be in the Heisman conversation even in the 2025 season. And had his running back room not been so freaking good with Jeremiah Love and Price, I've been like, yeah, maybe. That's going to be a challenge in and of itself, what I was just talking about. The running back room, you lost those pieces. Have you been able to replace them? Offensive line has experienced some turnover over the last few years, but they continue to play at a high level there. The defense is certainly strong and consistent year in and year out under Marcus Freeman. And looking at their schedule, it's pretty damn favorable. I'd love it if we knew what the over-under was in general, but just looking at it, you're against Wisconsin to open the season, and you're home against
Neutral
Rice.
site field, remember that too.
Say it one more time.
Neutral site field too, at Lambeau.
At Lambeau. Rice, home game, Michigan State home game. Then you're at Purdue, at North Carolina, home against Stanford, at BYU, home against Navy, home against Miami, home against Boston College, home against SMU, and then at Syracuse to end the season. I see 2 games on this schedule that give me pause. And I think 2 games that give Notre Dame fans the chance to say, like, reasonably, hey, this is a 50-50 game. You can have confidence in your team all you want, but the Miami game, you're very fortunate you get that one at home. I would love to see Carr versus Mensa at that point in the season. I still give a bit of an edge to Miami in that game, but it's not by much. To me, in my mind, it's like 51-49 Miami, not final score, but 51% Miami, 49% Notre Dame in that game. And then at BYU, we've talked about it before here on this podcast. We try and give some love to the Big 12. And TJ, I know you have a great following BYU fans on this platform. At Provo, potentially at night, kind of a tough test there. I mean, that's no matter what BYU puts on the field. I don't know if Bear Bachmeier is all of a sudden going to take tremendous strides, but he's got some more weapons to work with. Going to face Kalani Sitake's team on the road is never easy. And we did see some instances last year where this Notre Dame team had road trips where they did struggle. The Boston College game was one of them where it was a head scratcher late in the season. And Bill O'Brien's squad just kind of bowed up and gave Notre Dame everything they can handle and punched them in the mouth. So listen, there's interesting games on this schedule. What is North Carolina in year 2 under Bill Belichick? Navy can drag you down, but I don't think Navy is going to be in a place to really threaten Notre Dame this season. SMU, late in the season, attempting to play spoiler, jockeying for position within the ACC. They would have something to play for. What does Syracuse look like this upcoming season? What does a road game at Syracuse look like at the end of the season? I don't think it should make Notre Dame fans terribly scared, but see how it goes. Where are you at injury-wise? And I've said it before when talking about other Big Ten teams. I think Pat Fitzgerald and Michigan State are just going to make life difficult for people. And playing them in week 3 at home is good for Notre Dame, but I think that's going to be a knockdown, drag-out type of game. It's going to be an unsexy Big Ten game. So I'm excited to see what Notre Dame does this year. But for me, I think 11-1 in the regular season and a college football playoff berth.
This is, in my opinion, the most complete team returning in college football, and I'm not the only one saying that. Bill Connolly also is saying that, and Bill does a great job over at ESPN doing the S&P Plus and the returning production metrics. Notre Dame is number 1, which is why the expectations are high. 72% returning production, 19th ranked on offense, number 2 on defense. And the players that they have on defense are studs. Like, how many times last season do you remember watching Leonard Moore go toe-to-toe with some of the best wide receivers in college football? And we didn't talk about him in such a prominent light. He just flies under the radar when this is a premier cornerback and a guy who is going to be a transcendent player, I think, for the defense, especially going into this upcoming season for Chris Hass's squad. And then you talk about what you got in the linebacking core returning for another year. It's a little bit older, a little bit wiser. You added in DJ McKinney via the transfer portal. That's going to be a great fit for the secondary. And then for the offense, you're not replacing much, and what you are replacing is immense because of you're not going to have a Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, but outside of that, your wide receivers are all back. You went and you brought in 2 difference makers from Ohio State and Quincy Porter and Malin Graham. I'm ready to see what Jaden Greathouse can be in this season, what Jordan Faison can be this season, Micah Gilbert can be this season. You like some of the younger offensive linemen. And this is a team that I think has an identity. They know what their strengths are. And they were playing their best version of football to close out 2025 to where if they made it to the college football playoff, regardless of if they belonged in or not, they would have been a threat. They would have. I think that we can all agree the way Notre Dame looked, that was one of those 4 programs you did not want to have to face off against any single Saturday. You knew that they were going to bring their best punch, and you knew that if they played up to their standard, they were going to win. With that being said, I am taking the under in win totals. And boys, the reason I'm doing that is because I have to. Do you want to know what the win total is? 11.5.
11.5?
11. They have to go undefeated. FanDuel right now, win total on Notre Dame is 11.5. So that means they're saying undefeated season, which is tough. It's tough to do for any team in college football.
Not to cut you off, how is that juiced?
Oh, towards the under, for sure.
Toward the under, 100%. 100% toward the under.
But it's a minus 120. It's like, not much. It ain't much. It ain't juice much.
I could see them going undefeated. Like they could beat Miami, but like
it's minus 200. It's heavily juiced towards the under.
Yeah. I was gonna say it has to be too.
That's so interesting.
That's a crazy win total. But here's the thing. Notre Dame last year did not, you could argue they shot themselves in the foot in the specific games, but they never had a shoot themselves in the foot moment like they did in 24, right? Right. And so, yes, Tom presented, if SMU's challenging or if BYU can pull it together, or not pull it together, they've been great. But like if BYU can get it, like they're going to be more than a touchdown favorite, I think, heading out to Provo. If I had to call that right now.
More than likely, I would say so. I think
now, by the time we get to November or late October, that could change. And they're going to be a favorite against Miami. At worst by 3 points. Like they're going to call that a coin flip and give them the home field.
Right.
So I think if you're going to make Notre Dame a favorite in every single game in the season, like how many programs are favorites in every single game they play this year?
What would you say? Maybe
a couple?
One?
Yeah.
Like think about the best teams in the country. Ohio State's not going to be a favorite at Texas, I wouldn't think.
No.
And Texas is not going to be a favorite when for all of their games. And so I just think, look at the premier programs in this country. Oregon's not going to be a favorite in every game that they play this year. Texas Tech might be.
Maybe.
They could be.
The one team I would say I think would be a favorite, and this is kind of a toss-up besides Notre Dame, is the one team that they will either be the underdog against, Miami.
Yeah.
That's the only other one that I could really throw out there. Georgia will have a game where they're the underdog, or at least it will be a common balance. I don't think you'll see Texas do it. I don't think you'll see Alabama do it. So Notre Dame is in this vicinity of where I get the reasoning why you think 11.5 wins is profitable. And I do think that CJ Carr is a special talent. Like, this is a quarterback from the intangible side of things. Not production, but intangible side of things. May end up being the most talented player to come through South Bend, at least at that position, in decades. It's possible. It's very possible the way that he plays the game and the way that he has matured from week one all the way on up to what we saw at the end of the season. I truly believe that you are talking about a transcendent type of quarterback. So there's a reason to believe that they absolutely could be favored in every single game and go undefeated. It's just incredibly challenging to do. And if that happens, you have to be a team of destiny. Not even Indiana, that was undefeated this past year, was able to be the favorites in every single game. They were underdogs in the Big Ten championship. So it just happens that way.
Yeah. Ohio State's win total is 9.5. Texas is 9.5. Georgia 9.5. Georgia's and Ohio State's are juiced towards the over, so they're implying that they think they get to the 10. Texas is, ironically, we'll get to them in a minute, is juiced towards the under, saying that they think they're a 9-3 team. Is more likely than 10-2. Texas Tech is the only other one I can find. I didn't look through everyone else's. I know Miami's is 10.5 because we did it last year or last week. I'm sorry. Texas Tech is also at 11.5. Under is juice there, but yeah, pretty crazy for them to, again, they're saying it's more likely they win 11 than 12. So the under is juiced, but 11.5 win total is insane. My team's got to.
Not to cut you off, to see Troy's comment here. I don't know if this warrants any in-depth discussion, but always have to worry about Freeman having another NIU, Marshall, or Stanford moment. Do you guys see anything like that on their schedule this year where it's like, they better lock in?
I mean, not for one of those games. Could BYU beat them? Yes. Could SMU, who's got a lot of talent, Kevin Jennings coming back, beat them? Probably not, but yes. Like, I don't know that I would. I don't know that I worry as much about like one of those complete like head scratcher, like what the F type games. Because if SMU beats them, like we're not jumping off a cliff. Say SMU beat Miami last year and they still went to the national championship. Like, so sometimes those teams just find upsets, but I don't think of that level, not like the Stanford, Marshall, NIU level. Great comment by Troy.
This is now year 5 or 6 for Marcus Freeman. I believe it's 5. You shouldn't be losing these type of games anymore. Like, I mean, that's the way that my brand looks. If we consider you among the elite of elite coaches, you're not supposed to be losing these ones. You can suffer a loss to Miami, and I don't think many people would fret at that because Miami has a quarterback that may be good enough to go win the Heisman Trophy. They have a defense that was the backbone of their team. They have a stud wide receiver that is going to break ankles and hearts every single Saturday. Like, you can lose that game, and I think that most people would say, don't lose another, but I understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah.
Losing to a team like a 3-9 Syracuse, and one of those wins is Notre Dame, is inexcusable because of what you have established as your pedigree at a program. Like, early on in your tenure, I can get dropping to Stanford, losing to Marshall. Even the year that you went to the national championship, losing to NIU because if you got back on the wagon and you won every other game. But now we're 5 years into this. You should have your team mentally prepared to not play this any given Saturday stuff, especially when it comes to what you have returning at some of the most key important positions.
I am. All right, got to take an over under here. I think I'm going to go with the under. I think there's a great chance they go 12-0, but I think they slip up somewhere.
At BYU is so much to gain with that game because we've talked about the Big 12 and that, like, Texas Tech has a really favorable schedule this year. So you could see a circumstance where it's BYU and Texas Tech again in the Big 12 title game. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think BYU and Texas Tech play each other in the regular season this year. I can't recall exactly, and if one of you guys could check me on that.
You're right, they don't.
BYU hosting Notre Dame in roughly the middle of the season, decent time to do that. If they're able to knock off the Irish at home, that is a huge win for them, and it could buoy them, I guess, for the rest of the season. It could really help whatever their campaign is to potentially get into the playoff.
Yeah, you win that game, you can afford the loss to Texas Tech, I think, in the conference championship game, if that was to happen.
Yeah.
On to a game we wish was happening, but we at least kept them close to each other on this show. The USC Trojans. Wish that was happening against Notre Dame this year, but unfortunately, everyone sucks. Tom, resident Big Ten guy, so you can start us off with USC.
Let's start. What is their over-under?
I will tell you in 5 seconds.
Thank you.
8.5.
8.5.
I got it in 3 seconds.
I will not tell you in 5 seconds.
So you've got San Jose State, Fresno State, and Louisiana right off the bat. So there's 3-0. At Rutgers versus Oregon versus Washington to kind of open up your Big Ten play. So you're very fortunate that you get Oregon and Washington at home there because I think those are going to be challenging games, to say the least. I think USC is going to have a legitimate opportunity to vie for the playoff this year, but they're going to have their work cut out for them. Oregon and Washington are in back-to-back weeks. They don't have a bye there. Then they go to Penn State on October 10th, legitimately the best home game on Penn State's schedule. So could that be a nighttime whiteout? If the people at Fox have anything to say about that, it could ruin the whole situation for us, but we're going to see what happens. Then a bye week, middle of the season. So it takes a while for them to get a break. They'll go to Penn State, get a bye, and then they'll go to Wisconsin. So you always have to factor in that travel. Then on Halloween, after the road Wisconsin game, you host Ohio State. That's a tough one. You get another bye after Ohio State. Then you go to the reigning national champions, the Indiana Hoosiers, and you finish up the season at home against Maryland, and you're at UCLA. Conservatively, looking at this, call it 3 losses for USC, and it would be potentially the usual suspects, Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana. That being said, I think the Oregon game could be a coin flip for USC this coming season. If they put the right things together, I think Jaden Mayava is going to have to take a step in terms of elevating everybody around him. He's lost some pieces in terms of weapons. Obviously, there's been the turnover, so he's still going to have some pieces to work with there that should be encouraging. The defense is going to have to evolve. The defense is going to have to pick up where Danton Lind left off and try and figure out some things, because while it's nowhere near the Alex Grinch era, they're still giving up points. They still had a lot of injuries last season that really hurt their ability to play defense at a high level. So they've got to stop some people. That's going to be tough against the likes of Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana. Indiana's a bit of an outlier in that I think very highly of what Indiana's going to be able to do. They've proven themselves at this point. But what does that look like with Hoover and Marsh? Where are they at that point in the season in November? Injuries, something to consider for every one of them. But USC, I understand the 8.5, so I'm going to take the over. I'm not saying, oh, doom and gloom, they're absolutely going to lose to these 3 blue bloods, so to speak. And I guess Indiana's technically a blue blood now. But I could see 10-2. I could see 10-2. And I can honestly, high watermark, I could see 11-1. I could see a situation where maybe they upend Oregon at home. But that type of football against Dan Lanning, you've got to be prepared to be really physical, and you have to play really good defense. So Lincoln Riley has not shown that ability in his time at Oklahoma and USC. while they have the opportunity, I don't know if they'll grasp it. That's the real challenge when I look at the Trojans.
I think what you really wonder here is this the year that everything finally clicks? And that's
it has to be.
And you also look at this. I don't want to put everything on Maiyava's shoulders, but how many matchups that he's going to play in is he not the best quarterback on the field? Like one, maybe?
2, 3. Okay, well, let me ask you right now. Jaden Maiyava or Josh Hoover? Who are you taking?
It's tough to say.
That's probably a toss-up.
Yeah, it's probably a toss-up, but like at that point in the season, it's November. Like
We'll
Hoover
know a
could
lot
be
more.
fully indoctrinated into that offense. So he could be in really good shape.
Right.
He could be humming at that point.
I'd probably lean Maiyava if the game was week 1, but it's not. Like, that's what's tough. And we like to think that Hoover's going to be really good, and I do think he will be. The possibility exists that he doesn't. Like, he's not as good as we think he's going to be.
No, it's very true.
And Maiyava, I think you know kind of what your baseline and what you're getting. So I think I'd lean Maiyava there.
Damon Williams.
And more?
What about Damon Williams?
Yeah, that's another thing. I look at the Washington game. I think USC can win that game, but like that's a coin
They could
flip.
easily lose it too.
That's a coin flip.
Yeah.
The Penn State game, well, granted my alma mater, so I'm biased. At Penn State, if that is a nighttime whiteout game, that's a tough environment for any quarterback to enter. So
For sure.
going cross country especially. So that also could be a coin flip. I still like USC in that matchup as much.
Yeah,
as
I love USC in that matchup. I mean,
and like Chesney at the end of the season and the rivalry between USC and UCLA, like I don't put a ton of stock in what UCLA is going to be in season 1, but like Nico had the game of his life last year against Penn State, and it just takes the right opportunity for a guy that talented. And it's not that they don't have talent. So there's a couple games on here where you're like, yeah, well, there's some coin flips.
Cole, how much did they I mean, they brought in the number 1 recruiting class, and I think they have a top 6 recruiting class right now. Just thoughts on their overall roster heading into this year?
they added in 2 of the best transfer portal players that aren't getting talked about enough from the national perspective in Terrell Anderson, the wide receiver from NC State, and then Jontez Williams, the cornerback from Iowa State. It's the one player that Matt Campbell was not able to bring on over to State College. Instead, he went off to the West Coast, Best Coast. So they're really well put together. I think they have a solid running game. Their offensive line has stability from what they bring back. The transfer portal pieces weren't largely known as in like guys such as Bear Alexander in years past or highlight names such as you would go with like a Darian Mensah at quarterback, but they're solid. And I think they're plug and play additions that are going to come on in and be immediate contributors. The thing that you got to wonder is how quickly are all of these pieces going to be able to pick up a new defense underneath Gary Patterson? Because Gary Patterson is coming on in to replace what you lose in D'Anton Lynn as your DC. And I do think that he does have a lot left in the tank and the knowledge of how he was able to run certain formations out at TCU for years. It was a staple. I mean, how many years do we remember linebackers going on off wearing the giant neck brace in the back and playing in like prime bowl games? I mean, like that's like a calling card of a Gary Patterson team. But is it going to gel the way that it did underneath D'Anton Lynn? And if it does, then that physicality is going to be there. Then that toughness is going to be there. And you're going to be able to win games that last season you were on the pecking order of. I mean, like, remember, they beat Michigan last season at home, and then they lose in spellbinding, shocking fashion to Illinois on the road. I mean, like, you know, we're talking about a team that was a margin of error away from actually in a season that many people, I think, thought was maybe a year ahead for where you are with this team. I think that they were right on the cusp of getting to that level, which is why when you look at this season, it's more of a veteran staff. It's year 3 with a quarterback that you really trust to run Lincoln Riley's system. You have continuity at the wide receiver spot. You upgraded with the wide receiver number 1, or at least found a wide receiver 1 to replace what you're losing in Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. You like what you have in terms of young players stepping on up and thinking that they're going to have a big role. And the schedule is challenging, but it's not too daunting to where you're sitting here and saying 10-2 is implausible. And 10-2, I think, again, if you are 10-2 in these 2 conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, you will go to the college football playoff year in and year out. And maybe it feels like it's far-fetched to believe that that needs to be the expectation out in Southern California, but you're USC, damn it, start acting like it. USC is supposed to be a premier program in college football, and it's supposed to go to premier coaches in college football, and it's supposed to be a place that nobody plays second fiddle to on the West Coast. And right now, Oregon and Washington have more to say about what they've accomplished in the last decade than you do. And so at some point, if Jed Fish has his program trending upward, God forbid if Bob Chesney comes on into Westwood and changes that culture immediately, with the team that you have in place, USC should be a bare minimum 9-win roster. And I think that when you look at what the expectation is, they are thinking about the college football playoff. And you know what? They should. Because if I do like what they have, I just wonder if it's all going to click with the guy who's calling the shots.
What's tough is, yeah, they're certainly one of the more talented routes. Like, this should be a team and a program that is fighting for the playoff late into November.
Right.
The problem is that you are fighting against, 3 other programs that are in that very same situation when you talk about Ohio. What's on here? Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, like the teams you think would be in. But if you look at the Big Ten, if we said that Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon are likely playoff bound, you got to go play the games on the field. If the Big Ten was to get a 4th team in, who are you fighting that 4th team for? Well, it's Michigan, USC, and maybe Illinois if things break right, but maybe Washington. It's
I'm not ruling out Minnesota. I got to take a look at their schedule, but Minnesota's competitive every single year.
So it's like you're looking for that 4th team. And there's no reason with the talent profile that, let's be honest, it shouldn't be USC. Michigan's got a tough schedule too. Like we talked about Michigan last week. Yeah, could Michigan do some of the similar things? They're built so differently, but yeah, but both of them could. It's the question of you got to take care of business against all the teams that you should beat. And we talked about how Washington could slip up and get them. And yes, well, you can't have any of that. You can't have any bonehead games like you did last year against Illinois where you couldn't get a stop to save your life. And then you've got to beat at least one of those big 3 that we mentioned. If you beat one of those big 3 and take care of business everywhere else, I think you're going to the playoff. And you can't get blown out in the other 2 big ones. So over under 8.5, I'll go over here.
Yeah, I will go over too.
Yeah, over.
So nothing to fight about on that one, boys. We usually would start out the next one with Cole, but I'm going to let Tom start this Texas one out. Texas Longhorns, the arch hype machine back in full swing. But Sark had a comment that stood out to our boy Tom.
Yeah, I'd love to start with this, and thank you for the platform here. So Steve Sarkisian was recently quoted when talking about what his team could look like in 2026, according to our dear friends at On3, saying that this team is different. Quote, I would say probably for the first time, I feel like we have the top level talent across the board, position by position on both sides of the ball. He went on to include some comments about NIL and said, we don't do anything in our NIL contracts that are incentive-based, so we're done talking about money. Everybody's deals are done. Also said, quote, it's about being a team and becoming the best team we can be. I can respect the element about trying to get the NIL stuff under control because Texas has been flaunting how much money they have for years, the shiny, fancy cars out front of the building, all that sort of stuff. Everybody knows that Texas can pay up. So it's just trying to make sure there aren't distractions during the season. So that's great that they figured that thing out. The thing that gives me pause is him saying, we're different, and this is the best team I've had across the board. I'm not saying Steve Sarkisian's on the hot seat, but when you say stuff like this in the offseason and you set an expectation for what is to come in 2026, when the expectations from your fan base and nationally already pretty darn high. You got Arch Manning, Cam Coleman, Hollywood Smothers on offense. People are expecting fireworks offensively. Defensively, can Gary Patterson and company really short, or no, is it Gary Patterson? Am I correct?
No,
yeah.
It's Will Muschamp.
Will Muschamp. Gary Patterson left.
Excuse me.
Will Muschamp should add some juice to that defense, but it was like, man, this was already a pretty good defense last year. My big concerns are along the offensive line for Texas because they've had injuries. They've lost some guys to the NFL draft in the portal. They were thin last year, and going into this year, it's still a big question mark as to what they could do. They could not run the ball last year, and just because you got an upgrade at running back doesn't necessarily mean that Texas is going to all of a sudden figure everything out from the run game. Offensive line is a ton to prove. I draw a direct correlation to what James Franklin did last year in the offseason with Penn State, saying that this is the best personnel that he's had, roster and coaching staff, and look at how it ended. I'm not saying it's going to go the same way for Texas, but be careful saying stuff like this in the offseason when the expectations were for Penn State to credibly contend for the national championship. The same expectation exists for Texas this year. If Steve Sarkisian has the entire Arch Manning era and does not make it to a college football national championship game, it will be a failure. And if he goes on and this season comes and goes and they don't make the playoff, for instance, like I think they're going to make the playoff. I think they're one of the best teams in the SEC. But say they miss the playoff, Sarkisian's in hot water. And I think there's a lot of Texas fans already that were saying, well, what was going on with the offense last year? Because everybody was calling his play calling into question. And he was like, well, I was hired to be a play caller. That's not the problem. And he fixed the coaching staff on defense when nobody really saw that many problems with the defense. It was more, hey, the offense doesn't really click. We can't really run the ball. What's happening here? If Steve Sarkisian wastes the Arch Manning era at Texas, he will be out. And I don't know if that's going to be during 2026 or early in 2027. But man, we've seen coaches say stuff like this in the offseason in the past, and it always comes back to bite them. And we were already kind of worried about Sark and the rumor about him going to the NFL, that sort of stuff. These leaks get out there for a reason. So I am very curious to see what happens with Sark in Texas in 26.
Okay, let's go back to reality. I know it's April Fool's, but we don't have to go ahead and play these jokes today. Yes, Sark is going to be facing a lot of pressure in 2026, and the comments made are certainly going to only up the ante. But I got to ask you guys the question that I ask every single person whenever they say, if he doesn't do X, Y, and Z, we're going to fire him and bring someone else in. Great. Who are you bringing on in? Who is a guaranteed 100% upgrade over Steve Sarkisian that you are bringing on in that is going to help you get over the hump and win a national title?
Mike Norvell.
I know you wanted one. Listen, I know April Fool's is around the corner. I saw that extension he got this morning by what's his name?
Ballsack Sports or whoever.
It was fantastic. I mean, Pete Thamel or Pete Trammell definitely was very excited to go ahead and announce that extension for FSU. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, you have to find a good replacement. Like, I have this conversation with the Alabama fans that are on the fence of, like, I hate Kalen DeBoer. It's like, yes, there is an expectation here. But who are you genuinely bringing on in that is going to be an upgrade over currently what you have? Like a guaranteed. Because Cignetti's not an option. And I get that money talks, but money also talks in Bloomington. And that's why he is sticking around for the long haul. He's going to be there until he retires. So you got to knock it out of the park. And I don't know if there's a guy right now that is a surefire, no questions asked. Because like Mario's not leaving Miami. And I don't think that you're ever going to get Kirby to leave Athens. So take those two out. Take out Marcus Freeman. That's the problem. Now, do I think that you are going to be viewed as a failure if you waste the Arch Manning era and it at least doesn't end with you going to a college football playoff national championship appearance? To some, yes. I just think making the playoffs is it. And I think the big thing is that they understand this is a season that we're supposed to be one of the premier teams in college football. Because if we have a talent like Arch Manning and we're seeing him hit his stride at the right time, so God forbid we allow him to fall off the wagon. Hell no, we're not going to do that. Which is why, hey, why go get Raleek Brown or Hollywood Smothers when we can get both? Why go get a wide receiver like Emmett Mosley to come on back when we can just go add in Cam Coleman and make him a number 3? Why go out and bring in all these offensive linemen when we have some really good up-and-coming guys, but we're not ready to go ahead and start them? So, I mean, like, all the moves made were signs of we understand how important 2026 is. And I think the run game is going to be more sufficient. I think that you're going to have more trust when it comes to the passing attack. I think that you're going to feel really confident with Coach Boom on the back end, talking to the secondary, which didn't allow a lot of explosive plays a season ago. I think that you're going to regret the fact that you don't have a Mookie Taft and a Malik Muhammad back there, and you no longer have a Trey Moore coming off of the edge, and several of those guys that were so impactful to your team when Quinn Ewers was your quarterback, that you understand we can't afford to lose these type of guys. And the guys that they brought in are really, really promising on the defensive side. So I like what I've seen for this roster. I like what Texas has been able to build going into the offseason and going into the end of spring practice. This is a team that I think has the expectation of, we know that when New Year's comes around, we're not thinking about the new year. We're thinking about the semifinals. We're thinking about the national championship. And they're built, I think, right now on paper to do that. But here's the problem. How many times have we heard that a team is built on paper to go on a run to the national championship and proceed to go 9-3? I mean, that's what we're really facing when it comes to Texas this year.
And when you look at their schedule, which we talk about, that Ohio State game early is going to be very telling. Obviously, if they win that last year, they're going to the playoff. At the same time, if they beat Florida in the Swamps, they absolutely should have. They go to the playoff that way too. You look at the Ohio State game, going to Knoxville, playing in the Red River, playing against Ole Miss, at LSU, at Texas A&M. I mean, you'll avoid Georgia and Bama. I mean, congratulations. But the rest of this is not easy. Nobody would be surprised if Ohio State goes in there week 2, and wins that game. Then you got the Red River. Then you got to go to Kyle Field at the end of the year. You got to play at LSU. You welcome Ole Miss in with Trinidad Chambliss. Like, there are certainly 3 droppable games in that stretch. And you can't do what you did last year by losing to, and you're probably going to drop 1 or 2 of them. So you can't do what you did last year and lose to a bad team like Florida, which is unexcusable after Florida was getting dog walked by everybody early in the year, Miami, USF, whoever. So that's what it comes down to Texas for me. They're going to win a couple of big games. They may lose a big game or 2. Don't drop one of the stupid ones like you did last season, and you'll go to the playoff.
Yeah.
And if you're unlucky, you could lose to Ohio State. You could lose it in Baton Rouge, and then you could lose at A&M. But yeah, at the end of the day, if you lose 3 games in your schedule, I mean, you probably don't deserve to go anyway. Which is, not to take this to a conference or a playoff expansion talk, but yeah, I mean, that's why I'm good with 12 and not going to 16 or 24 or 4,865. I am good with just, you're not elite if you're losing more than 2 games a year, So rant over. What's their win total again?
I believe it says 9.5.
Tom, you had a point before I pick that.
What is the likelihood they go 7-5, 8-4?
I would go 3%.
8-4 is definitely.
I think 8-4 is on the table. Ohio
I'd say
State
8-4 is like 7%. 7-5 is 3%.
I mean, Ohio State, Red River. We've talked about the shootout is unpredictable. Ole Miss and LSU. There's potentially 4 right there, and that's not to discredit Texas A&M and at Tennessee. So like, it's a tough one. We said 9.5.
Yeah, 9.5.
I'm gonna go under because I think it'll be 9-3.
I'm going to go over. I'm sorry. There's just no way I can see a scenario where Texas is going to have that. I love the additions of what they brought in defensively. I think that 2 guys that you got to know about is Rasheem Biles, the linebacker from Pitt, talented player, and then Bo Masco, the cornerback from Rutgers, another guy who I think is going to be a day 1 plug-and-play starter. I think both really fit what Will Muschamp wants to run. And so, once again, that defense is going to be top 5. That offense, I think, is going to be top 15. I think that you go 10-2.
I'll go over. I'll say they, as much as I just cast doubt on like losable games, I'll believe until I don't. I'll buy it until you make me sell. They lose that Ohio State game. Like, I know that's not in conference, and they could certainly play their way back in, all these things. You lose that Ohio State game at home. It's not a season ender. It doesn't matter for the conference, but it does kind of give you the idea of like, man, you get one more mulligan for the rest of the way. And so you win that, and I think you look at the rest of the schedule and say, yeah, they could get out of this thing 11-1 or 12-0. Like, it is such a swing game for me, and I'm glad that it happens early, so that we kind of know. But to me, that's kind of the litmus test. You weren't able to get it done last year. If you get it done this year, yeah, I'll view your team differently. If not, if they lose that Ohio State game, I'm immediately revoking this prediction and saying they go 9-3.
There you go.
On to, a rivalry. We'll keep it there in the SEC. We'll go to Cole first. The Texas A&M Aggies. I don't know what theirs is. Did we look theirs up?
I'm pulling it up as we speak. So 3, 2, 1. Texas A&M is at 8.5.
Thoughts on what they bring back and what they look like here early in spring, Cole?
So let's just call it as is. I think that there was 2 ways to look at Texas A&M last year. In some eyes, it's a failure because you didn't play a rigorous schedule in the 2 games that were quote-unquote challenging. You lost, and you did. I mean, Texas at home, and then you also had Miami at home. But then there's the other way of looking at it as Texas A&M has been in the SEC since 2012. They have won 10-plus win season before last year. And Mike Elko comes in, and within 2 years, he has changed that program around for the better. He has this team now punching out day one talent. There is an attitude, a physicalness, and there is a new aura that kind of lingers with this team. Like the way that I've always described a place like Texas A&M or any coaching job where you're taking over a disastrous program that needs a fresh start. It's like buying a house that somebody's lived in. It's going to take about a year for the remnants of the previous owner to kind of disappear. And that was the 8-4 season. And that's why it was Texas 8-4. Well, now it's Texas 11-1. And I believe that even though they are losing a lot offensively, brand new offensive line, got to find a new number two wide receiver, or number one, depending on how you look at it. Got to be able to figure out what you want to do with the running back position outside of Reuben Owens. They're still a good team. They're still a very good team. And I think that even with losing the pieces that you did, new defensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator, that might not be the biggest problem that you have. Colin Klein was going through a coaching parallel between being a head coach and recruiting at Kansas State while preparing for a college football playoff berth. He also goes and internally promotes Holman Wiggins, known for developing wide receivers. They had one of the best wide receivers in college football last season, in Mario Craver. That was a human highlight reel in countless games. And he's back with the same quarterback. Defensively, Mike Elko knows what he wants for his personnel. I think the big thing about it is every single year, there is a player that we are not talking enough about, that we are going to be talking about from some school. Like they have this kid named Santa Ono, I believe is how you say his last name. I know I just butchered that. I'll tell you in a second. But he's a defensive tackle from Northwestern. And nobody's heard of this guy. But I can tell you who has. Mike Elko. And he's probably going to turn him into one of the better interior defensive linemen next season. Anto Saka is how you say his name. So we're talking about a guy who comes on in and targets the right pieces for his defense. And it's probably going to have this team once again being in the range of a 10-win campaign. College football playoff bound. Schedule's a little bit more challenging. You have a leeway period of getting a game against like LSU early on in the season while Lane Kiffin is still getting acclimated with Baton Rouge. You still have the game at the end of the season with Texas. But for the most part, the games that you're kind of circling are ones that you're accustomed to playing. Having to go face off against Oklahoma. Having to go face off on the road in Willie B on a Saturday night, which is where your season kind of went off the rails in 2024. So, like, they understand who they are. What this is all going to come down to, boys, is Marcel Reed. That's what it is. Marcel Reed is going to have to play more consistent. He's going to have fewer turnover type throws. He's going to have a better, I think, ideology of when to read the room and be able to understand when to pull, when to hold on. But it's hard for me to look at Marcel Reed and say, a quarterback that last season, even with all of the issues going into his third year, with a similar offensive approach and maybe some things that you're going to do different that Colin Klein called that you didn't like but Holman Wiggins won't call, it's hard for me to say that you can't be a national title contender. Now, I'm not saying Texas A&M is going to win the national title. I'm not even going to say that they should make the college football playoff. But you're at a bridge now where conversations of, hey, that Texas 8-4 joke, it's kind of extinct, and it should be because of what you have returning and what you have as your overall stigma of who you are as a program.
Win total set at 8.5, and when you look at their schedule, that Arizona State game out of conference is pretty interesting early. They should, I would think they win that, especially being at home. At LSU, at Bama, at South Carolina, Tennessee, at Oklahoma, and then Texas to end it. I mean, there's certainly winnable games here, but I mean, would it surprise you at this point? I mean, that last month of the season, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas within it. Well, I guess the Alabama game's in October, but Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, and then you had at LSU earlier. I mean, I think anything less than 9-3 would be a disappointment. So you got to win all your games and then find a way to win one of those three because you can't have 8-4. Last year you had the really good year. It would be a surprise, I think, to a lot of people if Texas A&M went 10-2 through this schedule. Can they get to 9-3 and at least be in those conversations to where that Texas game at the end of the year is a play-in game? Both those teams go in that thing at 9-2, and the winner goes to the college football playoff. I think that's what you want. Give yourself a chance when you get to those last two games against Oklahoma and Texas. If you only have 1 or 2 losses going into that November 21st matchup against Oklahoma, theoretically, you can still play your way in. If you have 2 losses going into that, it's hard to see yourself going 2-0 at Oklahoma and then at home against Texas. Not that it can't be done, We'll see what all those teams look like when we get that late in the year. But not the toughest schedule. I mean, Missouri State, Kentucky, Arkansas, at Missouri, the Citadel, South Carolina, tough place to play. Tennessee, we'll see what their quarterback situation looks like. They should still rack up a lot of wins. The problem is going to be, is it only the 8 so that we can make the joke or not? 8.5, Tom, you have a pick on this one?
I'm going to say over because I think it's 9-3. How are we going to feel about Texas A&M if their losses are at LSU, at Oklahoma, and home against Texas? Because losing your last 2 games of the season, depending the fashion in which they do it, 9-3 is kind of that fence riding point we've talked about when it comes to the College Football Playoff Committee. If those are not good, if those are points where the offense looks as stuck in neutral as it did against Miami, for instance, like Brent Venables at home late in the season with a playoff berth potentially to fight for, will give Marcel Reed fits.
Right.
But again, has Marcel Reed taken a leap that he can overcome those things? Have they fixed things in terms of the running game so that they can actually run the football? Like, they struggled mightily against Miami in that department. Texas to end the season, that's tough. I talked about it moments ago with the Longhorns. I like Texas there. But if your losses are at LSU, at Oklahoma, and Texas, those are all strong losses. I do think I trust what Texas A&M brings back more than what Alabama brings back. So I like Texas A&M right now to beat the Tide in Tuscaloosa, which is no small thing. So we'll see how that shakes out. That could blow up in my face, and that's fine. But if your last 2 games of the season are losses to Oklahoma and Texas, what is the committee going to feel about you?
You won't get in the playoff, but there'll at least be an argument there, I think,
Yeah.
to a certain degree. The losses that you can't afford is doing what you do always whenever you face off against a Shane Beamer South Carolina team. Fall short and Willie B. That's a loss that will come back to look horrendous on your schedule. Losing to Arizona State, who proceeds to go 8-4, will be one that will probably be doxed against them. Losing to, say, a Oklahoma team that is 7-5 this year, that'll be one that'll be doxed against them. So it's the way the losses look. I think that they're a 9-win team right now. You have a quarterback that I still think is good enough to get the job done. I really love the addition of Isaiah Horton to come on in and play that role opposite of Mario Craver. The offensive line is so interesting to me because if you have 4 new starters and they're all transfer portal players, and they come from big programs. I mean, half of them come from LSU. One's from Alabama. I mean, it's not like guys that are, unable to perform. I just say it's challenging right now to believe that a 10-win team is going to be left out for a 9-win roster. That's just all. But I still think the over is going to hit.
I'll go over here at 9-3, but just not with much confidence. I think they really benefited last year. Now, the Notre Dame win was huge. They really benefited from a soft schedule last year, and I think this one gets more difficult, and I could see them dropping. Between the 4 or 5 games I mentioned, I could certainly see them dropping at least 3, maybe 1 more. But I'll give them a benefit of the doubt and go over on this if I've got to bet it today. Let's quickly do Tennessee. Cole, I know you got to get out of here at some point, but let's do Tennessee. If you need to run, I can do Penn State with Tom alone. But
I'm probably going to have to.
Let's roll with the Vols for a few minutes, and then we'll get you out.
Very interesting team because I loved the hire of Jim Knowles. And what I really loved about the Jim Knowles hire is he said, I'm going to bring in a player at every single position. That way that they know how to run my defense. So you go get a Chaz Coleman. That's a talented player. I think Chaz Coleman has an opportunity to be the best pass rusher in the SEC this year. That's how high I am on him. They bring in a linebacker, Amari Campbell. They bring in a defensive tackle. They also go out and they bring in, I believe it is the safety. Tom, do you remember who he is from Penn State off the top of your head?
King Mac.
Nah, not him. I know Dejon Lee. Dejon
Lane. Yeah, thank you.
Dejon Lane. They go out and they bring in guys who are veterans like Kylan Lee, and then Quan Moss comes on in from Kansas State. So I think that when you look at the offensive side of things, you're always going to know what you're getting in a guy with Josh Heupel. It'll be a top 10 scoring offense. It will be explosive. They will run the football efficiently. I do like their offensive line a little bit more. I think that David Sanders could take another step forward. You have two really good wide receivers who are very young and promising with Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley. And then you got Tristan Keys. He comes on in an LSU initial recruit that flips at the last second. I think he is going to be in for a dominant season. Like, he may end up being the best wide receiver that they have. But the two questions that you have right now is who's your quarterback? And I think it's a question because Faison Brandon may have more upside than what you got with George McIntyre, but McIntyre's been in the system a little bit longer. Do you go with that guy and think that he's going to be a more sufficient fit? And the other one is how quickly does this defense pan on out for Tennessee? Because the thing that we know about a Jim Knowles squad is that year one, it's all about establishing a culture. It's all about building a rapport. Year two is where you really hit. And we saw that when Ohio State had him. We saw that when Oklahoma State had him. There was a reason why they were viewed as the elite top-tier defenses in college football. And so if you're Tennessee, is this a retooling year for you? What are the realistic expectations that you have internally for the squad going into the season? Because for some, 8-4 is a loss year. Because if you feel like that you're Tennessee, you should be back in the conversation of national title contender. And you haven't been at a high-end level or at a consistent rate even in the Josh Heupel era. You've had 10-win seasons. You've made the playoff. You've done things to where now we're viewing you as a respectable team in the SEC, but are you there entirely just yet? Or are you okay with this season being we'll take it as is? 8-4 is a good year. Because if we now know that we got a quarterback that we can trust, we got some young playmakers that are hitting their stride, we got a defensive coordinator that was getting the best version of his unit in play by the time that we got to the end of the year. Like, that's really what it is. So everything that I'm paying attention to with Tennessee is going to be based off of how quickly are pieces gelling together. Are we looking directly at, say, the quarterback position and wondering, they're picking up their pace really efficient right now. Are they going to be good enough to be able to start week 4, week 5? Are they going to be able to beat Alabama? Will they hold their own against Georgia? Will they be able to take down a Texas when UT faces up against UT? What does this defense look like? Because right now, I think the expectation is fair to say if you get to 8-4, it's not the year you wanted, but it's a year you can live with. But if things start to turn in your direction and everything starts to trend on upward schedule, it's challenging. But, I mean, we said the same thing about Oklahoma last year, and they ended up still going 10-2. So I'm just saying, like, anything is possible, especially when you have an offense that with Josh Heupel is going to be able to run it efficiently, create opportunities in the open field, and then when you, of course, have the opposite side of the defense that is now picking up the pace and not being a liability like it was last season underneath Tim Banks.
Is there real value in this over-under win total of 7.5? Am I crazy in thinking that, yes, it does look daunting. You didn't get McGuire back. You did hire the strength and conditioning coach from Indiana, and you hired maybe the best defensive coordinator in college football who brought a lot of his guys with him.
Right.
Like, I'm not trying to be the Tennessee homer here, and I know we do really well with their fans, but you're getting to play Georgia Tech early. That's a big prove-it game for both teams, and you're a favorite in that game, even though it's on the road. But they're not going to – they lose Haynes King too. Right, like, and they lost Buster Faulkner too. So yeah, you've got a new quarterback, but guess what? So does the Haynes and Haynes law firm no longer there, and they've had a lot of change there at Georgia Tech, and their over/under win total is not very good in the ACC at like 6.5 this year. So that's a very winnable game. You get Auburn and Arkansas, two first-year head coaches. You don't have to go play in the swamp where, thankfully, somehow last year you found a way to win, but you don't have to play that thorn in your side of Florida. You get A&M, who we said we have questions about. And you play Vandy, again, without Diego on that roster. Yeah, you do have tough games against Alabama, A&M, LSU. But I do think the schedule is somewhat Texas in there, too. I left them off. The schedule is somewhat workable. You get another first-year head coach in Kentucky. Like, I think there's value in the over on Tennessee's win total.
There's reasons to believe that if the offense can pick up the pace. And let's also remind ourselves, Josh Heupel last season had a quarterback that didn't go through any spring drills, got on in by the middle of the summer, and led the SEC in passing yards. So I'm not going to doubt the development of a quarterback underneath a guy like Josh Heupel calling the shots. I'm just not. So you got to say to yourself, okay, if that's going to be the case of how we're building it moving forward, yeah, they could easily be, I think, a 9-win team. maybe even a 10-win dark horse. You got to hope, though, that the defense is the bread and butter, though, because there are some really good pieces, some foundational structures in play. What I wonder about is, again, the theory when it comes to a Jim Knowles defense. Year one is about establishing yourself as a really prominent unit that can only build off of their success. Year two is when you hit your stride and you're going down, pedal to the metal, guns a-blazing, ready to go ahead and shoot first, ask questions later. Like, that's the mentality that Jim Knowles plays with. Can it get there by the end of, let's go October? And heading into November, do you have an opportunity to maybe use this as your advantage? If that happens, then yeah, I think it's a very easy win total to lean in favor of them. If not, I can understand if you want to take the under this season. I do.
Tom, you want to make a pick on this one?
If it's 7.5, I am taking the under.
And Tennessee fans not going to be happy.
No, listen, I think Texas, Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M are some tough ones immediately. So I'm like, you're already, sticking 4 there on the board.
Yeah.
When Lane comes back, though, that's going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, of course. Who's to say that Auburn under Golish doesn't bow up and beat somebody this year? And who's to say it's not Tennessee? Looking at Vanderbilt at the end of the year, if Tennessee's in a spot where it's like, well, what do we really have to play for? And if the team is a little checked out, that game's in Nashville. Rourke has had a whole season. If he's healthy and Vanderbilt's got something clicking, it's a tough team to beat. We mentioned the Georgia Tech game. Yeah, Haynes and Haynes are gone, but they put a tough team on the field on a pretty consistent basis. Like, I could see some games that just jump up and bite Tennessee this year. And I've said it before, I thought Josh Heupel was on the hot seat going into 2025. I think he's definitely on the hot seat going into 2026. If this team's 6-6, he's out.
He's not out this year. Now, 2027, we can have the conversation. Again, Tennessee fans, as much as you want to gripe about it, and I completely get it, you want to get back to like it's 1998. Remind yourself of where you were when you forced Philip Fulmer out the door and how long it took you to land the right coach, Josh Heupel. Like, sometimes you just have to accept 1 year of 8-4 or even a 6-6. If that means 2 years from now, you're in the hunt for a college football national title bid. And that might be the case. I'm going to take the over. I think that it's right at 8-4 is a very solid season for Tennessee. I think that depending on how quickly the quarterback position evolves, that will decide if you're up or down. But right now, I think that it's hard for me to doubt Josh Heupel working with QBs, and it's hard for me to doubt his rushing attack because that has been one of the more potent things that we know about the SEC. So before I leave, I'm going to take the over. I think that they are going to be a very balanced team that has all the potential in the world to really, really hit their stride at the right time and maybe be a dark horse to make a run.
I am going to hold on 1 second, Cole. I'm going to take the over. Tom took the under. Just before you go, Cole, we're going to start our Penn State segment off with this over under on Penn State, and then you can leave.
What's the over under?
For the Nittany Lions, 9.5 for Matt Campbell in year one.
Under. Listen, I love the roster, and again, it's basically Iowa State masquerading in that Nittany Lion white, but the schedule, I think 8-4 is a damn good year, but the bowl win for a guy like Matt Campbell to establish his culture and reprove that there are actual realities that can be had in State College. Even with all the Iowa State players coming on in, you still have challenging matchups, and the players that you retained are really promising, but they got to fit your system. I will say the one reason I would lean at least slightly potentially over, schedule is manageable. Schedule is, in my opinion, very manageable. And I do think that the hire of D'Anton Lynn is one of the better hires of the offseason. He is a top 5 defense coordinator in the sport. I think that Matt Campbell is a top 5 motivator in the sport. Add that together, there's a reason to believe that there can be something promising coming to State College in 2026.
Mm-hmm. You heard it here first, folks. Cole Thompson said that Matt Campbell is Curt Cignetti 2.0.
Yeah.
Have a great week, bud.
Bye-bye.
All right, Tom and I will finish this thing up and take us home. Tom, being our Penn State guy, our resident expert, and Oh shoot, I could keep going on the accolades. We'll make this like a LinkedIn header. Resident homer,
Big homer. Yeah, definitely.
designated speaker for the best conference that ever existed, and just all the things. Tell us about Penn State. Let's talk a little spring ball for a sec, because are you hearing anything out of that, or what Campbell's saying coming out of the spring?
The challenge Penn State is dealing with right now is that Rocco Becht is on a pitch count. Backup quarterback Alex Mansky has been shut down for spring ball because of a cleanup surgery, so he'll be back.
You're running with the second team.
Yes, you're running with freshmen, like true freshmen, incoming freshmen, Peyton Falzone and Case Evans. Falzone, who flirted with Auburn there for a minute, but is not expected to see the field in 2026. And the leader in the clubhouse right now at quarterback is Connor Berry, who was at Appalachian State and most recently was at Division III, Christopher Newport. So the headline is a Division III transfer quarterback is taking more of the reps in spring ball. The truth of the matter is that should not worry Penn State fans. I understand that it would. You would like it to be Becht. You would like it to be Mansky. And I think this was a chance for Penn State fans in spring and whatever the blue-white game materializes to be, to see what the quarterback position could be in 2027, because Mansky is still developing overall, but has buzz coming out of the high school ranks. You know what you're getting in Rocco Becht. You just need to bubble wrap him and make sure he's good for this upcoming season. Plenty of little injuries here and there that have not come up, but that this team is dealing with in the wake of 2025, regardless of what school the player was at before. Offensive line, a lot of competition across the board to figure out what there is actually going to be at a variety of different positions, because you lost a bunch of talent to the NFL draft. You lost a couple depth pieces to Virginia Tech and other schools in the portal. Defensively, I echo the comments by Cole there. We're very excited about what Danton Lynn can do. We just don't know exactly what he's going to do. And I think that's the encouraging thing is he preaches multiplicity. He's run a different defense pretty much every single season that he has been DC, going all the way back to UCLA and his years at USC. So I think there's some good pieces for Penn State in its interior defensive line. They've added a ton of size, interior defensive line and interior offensive line. So hopefully they're a little bit more physical and violent in the trenches this year. Linebacker is a wide open question mark for me, because there's talent, but you're changing their roles and responsibilities this year. And that in the past, under James Franklin, linebackers have been more about shooting gaps and maybe even rushers, so to a degree, asked to do some things in pass coverage. I think what's going to happen this year for Penn State is that you're going to see linebackers playing a more traditional role. So that's a shift. The secondary is pretty talented. So I'm very encouraged to see what they put on the field defensively. That being said, if the over-under is 9.5, I think I'm a pretty conservative guy. I'm looking at this and I'm saying 8-4. And I have not yet made a prediction on this season whatsoever on my own show, State of State, a Penn State football show. But looking at it, home against Marshall, at Temple, home against Buffalo to open the season, those should be wins. Big Ten schedule, you open up with Wisconsin at home. Luke Fickell and company have put more into that team, but I still think I favor Penn State in that one. At Northwestern, TJ, you and I have talked about this a bunch. I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think it's going to be a really competitive game that's been moved to a Friday, and that's kind of the unveiling of the new Ryan Field for Northwestern. They put a boatload of money into this program. Aiden Childs at quarterback, Chip Kelly at offensive coordinator. Big night for Northwestern. I think that's going to be a competitive game, but I still like Penn State ultimately in that game, and Penn State fans are kind of ticked to be playing on a Friday. Then home against USC, we talked about that before. I think USC could win that one. That's a 50-50 coin flip type of game. At Michigan, 50-50 coin flip type of game, but I think I like what Michigan puts on the table a little bit more at this point in time, unfortunately. Home against Purdue after a bye in between Michigan and Purdue, I like Penn State there. At Washington, there's another coin flip, in my opinion. I think DeMond Williams Jr. and company are going to play a really solid game. So I'm looking at this. I've said 8-4. I think the losses are USC, Michigan, Washington, and potentially Minnesota. And then the end of the season, Rutgers and Maryland. Like Minnesota, Rutgers, and Maryland, I think are all winnable games for Penn State. I think Minnesota is a winnable game for Penn State. So if you're going to put your money anywhere, I'd say with Penn State hovering in the 8-4, 9-3 range is reasonable. And I think that there are expectations within the Penn State fan base that this team could go 10-2. And I just want to harp on the amount of change, the amount of change, TJ, has been incredible for the coaching staff, for the roster. This year, it's just put something on the field that is going to be respectable and is going to play hard. And I think they're still going to win 8 or 9 games, which is a damn good season in college football. If everybody was expecting to fire James Franklin and then immediately take a leap into the playoff, you're not being a reasonable, rational person. So that's the way I look at the season.
The under is juiced at -150. And I would say 9-3, 8-4 is where you're most likely. Like, I agree with that. I kind of think that, most of the time in college football, you lose one game you're not supposed to, and you win one game you're not supposed to. And if that was the case, I'd probably say that Penn State ends at 9-3. It is a gift of a schedule. I said this. I actually did a Penn State video this morning. I don't know if you'll agree with this or if Penn State fans will agree with it, but they kind of struck out on a bunch of coaching candidates and then ended up with the best guy they could have hired anyway. But I wonder if more guys would have been clamoring for this job if they'd have known what this schedule was going to be in year one. Like, if they could have had that, because it wasn't released until January. And maybe not. Maybe that's a very nearsighted way to look at a job. But the kind of winning you do in year one can really buy you some equity when you take over a premier blue blood type program. So maybe not. Avoiding the big three is no doubt a huge benefit and advantage. And like we talk about with USC and Michigan, those are 8-4 teams that if they win 1 or 2 more games, then they overachieve Vegas's expectations. The fans, USC fans have a little higher expectations for their team. So do Michigan. But just the national perception of those teams is they're going to be hovering around 8-4, 9-3. I don't know that they're world beaters. I agree with you. Slight lean because of the home field advantage against USC. If you flipped where those 2 games were, I'd probably favor USC at home, and I'd probably favor Penn State against Michigan in Happy Valley. The Washington one is key. That's the big swing game to me, because you could lose both USC and Michigan, and then you get a bye weekend in Purdue. And no offense to the beautiful fountains or the beautiful area that exists in West Lafayette, Indiana, but you almost have 2 bye weeks there. Not that you want to overlook somebody completely, but you kind of have 2 weeks to get ready for that Washington game. Hopefully you get your guys out early when you play at home against Purdue and really have them rested for Washington. Who does Washington have the week before they play Penn State? Maybe we'll do Washington next week. The week before they play Penn State, they go to Nebraska. And so I know they come home to play Penn State, but that's usually a physical game, and you've just gotten off of a trip on Halloween against Nebraska. And so I don't know, maybe slight benefit to Penn State just from a matchup to matchup, week to week. Now benefit back to Washington for it being at home. But man, you slip up and just win one of those 3 games, I think 10-2 is very achievable. I'll lean under here just because you're probably going to drop a game in a season that you don't expect to drop, whether that be the Minnesota game you talked about, whether that be the Northwestern game, whether that be something weird that we're not expecting. But I do really like Rocco Becht. I really like Matt Campbell. He was a big name around the time that Mike Norvell got hired, and a lot of people thought Florida State would go in that direction back in 2020. I guess it was 2019 when we made the hire. But I do like the hire. I do like where this program is headed. I think he is kind of reinstilling a different kind of approach and culture here than existed under Franklin. And I do think it's to some degree clicks right now because of the way the schedule sets up. But I will lean just slightly under. But again, I think all it takes is beating Washington. Or you beat USC. There's a really good chance that Penn State starts this season. They beat USC at home. They're to mid-October and have no losses. Not that they can't lose Northwestern or couldn't drop a game they shouldn't, but they've got a really good chance to start this thing 6-0. And then at that point, you're talking about a top 7 team at worst playing at Michigan. And we may relook at how we view that game. If Michigan by that point has losses to Oklahoma or Iowa, or those are the only 2 teams they play before then. So they play Indiana after Penn State. But man, if Michigan has a couple of losses and Penn State goes in there with 1 loss or undefeated, we might look at that a little differently based on how things click. So as of right now, I'll go 9-3, but I think 10-2 is very realistic. And if that's the case, with a soft schedule, 10-2 still might get you into the playoffs.
That's the thing. Is there is tremendous potential this year. I overall tend to take a conservative approach when looking at schedules, and we've kind of talked about a bunch of different teams, and like Tennessee, for instance. Is it kind of a doom and gloom perspective to say, hey, they could go 6-6? I don't think they will, but you have to consider what the low watermark is. I think looking at this schedule, I could see a team like Minnesota playing a really tough game against this Penn State team. Like, what do injuries look like in November for both squads? You have to consider those variables. I think that's important, weather being incorporated, especially in Big Ten play. But man, I could see Penn State beating USC. I could see Penn State somehow overcoming Michigan, but like on the road with what Bryce Underwood and Whittingham could have going at that point in the season, I still think I favor the Wolverines in that game. This is a year of change. And what you're trying to do is put a physical team on the field. I think Penn State is lacking those overall game changer alpha athletes. They have a handful of guys that are 5-star caliber players. And I hate that terminology, TJ. We talk about it all the time, but like, how many guys do they have that are truly game changers? There aren't that many. So I think what Penn State's doing in year one is stabilizing with the Iowa State guys so that we have continuity, especially in the offensive side of the ball. Becht already knows most of his tight ends, most of his running back situation, most of his wide receivers, and a few of his offensive line pieces. And he's basically an extension of the coaching staff. So helping that transition process. Defense is where I have the question. How quickly do they get up to speed with Danton Lynn, and then understanding what Matt Campbell is trying to do defensively and teach that to guys who are Iowa State guys, by the way. So then you're disseminating that communication, that information. There's a lot of change. So I just don't have big expectations for Penn State. I hope to be pleasantly surprised. And I think the real test is going to be, once you're done with these one-year rentals from Iowa State, what does 2027 look like? Because then you're going to understand what the development piece is for this staff. Can they truly develop at the highest level in FBS? Can they hit in the transfer portal? Because I think, TJ, Penn State has had that reputation under Franklin of being much more traditional and not necessarily wanting to use the portal, kind of Clemson-esque. And they've been more aggressive than Clemson. But now they had to hit the transfer portal heavy because of the exodus this year, the two-way traffic in and out of the franchise, or out of the program. So when you have the opportunity to do more of that as the years go on, what does this team look like in 27? That's more my concern. 26, not to say it's a wash and I'm forgetting about it, but I'm going to be happy with whatever we get from this Penn State team.
Let me read this last comment and we will get out of here. Anthony says, why is it that Cole's not even on here to defend himself, but it's all right. Why is it that Notre Dame and the SEC have this idiotic argument where they get away with strong losses, but other teams can't? Do you want to take that? I've got an answer, but
yeah, it's you, and you mentioned it in there, and I saw somebody said it was a joke. I'd love to know why they think that. That's great. But yeah, why is that Notre Dame and SEC teams have this idiotic argument? And I'd say it goes beyond that, Anthony. And I don't know if I'd call it idiotic. Like, there's certain Big Ten teams that are getting that pass as well, like an Ohio State or an Oregon, or now Indiana as well is going to get that favor. Miami's getting that favor in the ACC. If you have proven that you are playing within, call it the top 10, not just say like the rankings, TJ, like, oh, you're ranked in the top 10, like
talent profiles.
Incredibly, if you were a top 10 team, it's the same way that we look at NFL teams of like, oh, well, some team will make it to the playoffs and they're like, well, they didn't beat a winning team or they didn't beat somebody in their conference. And you're like, okay, like you played enough games that you were able to rack up the victories needed to make the playoff. But these teams get a pass because if they're losing to another team that's within that top 10 echelon, you have to consider that. And if you lose to a team that's, for instance, is like 30 and below, then it's like, okay, you lost to an inferior roster and an inferior team. So that loss means a little bit more. And it's the real challenge of what we're dealing with in college football is that there is no uniformity. It's apples to oranges within individual conferences. It's really difficult. Miami doesn't get the benefit of the doubt. I'm a Miami fan, but there's a double standard. We have to go undefeated in order to make the playoffs. We got lucky that the committee made the right choice last year. I agree with you. You did get lucky that they made the right choice, but you proved it in the playoff. And I think Miami does have the benefit of the doubt. TJ, I don't know how you feel about it, but I think Miami has the benefit of the doubt going into this year.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, you mentioned the unbalanced scheduling. I do think brands matter, but like the unbalanced scheduling matters, right? And it's this weird thing. In the NFL, there's no like this team looked better than that team or this. It is just, here are the requirements to get into our postseason tournament and you know them and it's done, right? In college, it's just this weird blend of deserving versus best.
Mm-hmm. The Herb Street argument. I hate it, but it's
Texas played an infinitely more tough schedule last year than Texas A&M did. Do you think that Texas A&M at 11-1 was a better team than Texas at 9-3? Well, they played each other head to head. And so, I would say that no, I think Texas was a better team. But who was more deserving, the 11-1 team or the 9-3? Well, that gets to another argument that says, well, 11-1 against a cupcake type schedule versus 9-3 against Murderers Row. Which one is more impressive? And so it really, the whole thing, it is set up almost to fail because it is so convoluted of best versus deserving versus, you just mentioned, schedules within a conference. Missouri goes 10-2 every single year, and they've never beaten a team with a winning SEC record. And so, and then you look at what Florida has to play every year, and you look at what Tennessee has to play every year with their rivalries. And so, I don't know. It's just all a mess because we don't have defined parameters of here is how you qualify for the playoff. It is just such an art form that they're trying to figure out every year. Part of that's what makes college football great, and part of it is incredibly frustrating if you're a Texas fan at the end of last season and saying, dang it, we really should have been in. Because there's no doubt that they were better than some of the teams they played against. Texas is 9-3 versus Oklahoma's 10-2. Well, Texas beat them head to head. And so which one was better? I don't know, man. Like, that's why it's all subjective, and that's why it's really tough. That all leads me to say brands matter. If brands matter. If you're on that argument, being a big brand is going to matter. It's why BYU didn't make it in 11-1. Like that, because if you put any other logo on the side of their helmet with only losing to a top 3 team twice, they're in that thing. So, and one of those being a conference championship, brands ultimately matter, I think.
The brands matter, and it was revealed so much this season. I love the Cover 3 podcast. Those guys called out the AP rankings people so often, and how often were there decisions made that made absolutely no sense based on what occurred on the field, but they made sense based on brands and brand bias. So that's an unfortunate thing, a flaw we have in this sport. And even when looking at the College Football Playoff Committee, you could say that brand bias helped Miami get in. And it's like, should they have been in the playoff? And it's like, well, unfortunately, they lost some games that it gave people pause. And the ACC had the odd way of how teams made it into into their championship game in the first place. And nobody gave Duke any credit. We were like, you won a bad conference at the end of the day. It's so complex right now. I do not envy these people who are sitting there trying to make decisions. And it's why I do feel we need to get to some uniform statistical measures of going back to kind of a BCS computer type system, but even that can be manipulated. Like, I don't want this to be an eye test situation anymore. This should not be subjective. This should be, if you win X amount of games within your conference, then you get X, Y, and Z. I think we need to get to that point, but we're not there.
Pate had an interesting video last year at some point, and he basically said, like, remove all the subjectivity from it, from the national perspective, and just let the conferences decide who they want to send. Let the SEC pick 4 teams, let the Big Ten, which actually brings more subjectivity to it. But I think it's easier to say, okay, who are the best 4 teams in the Big Ten? Who are the best 4 teams in the SEC? Who are the best 2 teams in the ACC? And who are the best 2 teams in the Big 12? And decide it that way. Just give us that. And then Notre Dame, if they win a certain amount, gets in, and the group of 5 gets 1, and there's your 16. Mm-hmm. I don't hate that. I don't hate that idea because it's really hard to judge Miami from this conference and Alabama from this conference. How in the world do you do that? And the same thing, Ohio State and Tech. Well, they played each other, but Ohio State and A&M, whatever. I really like the idea of what that Pay had of let the conferences send the 4 teams that they want. Let them figure out who the best 4 are and go from there. I don't think that's, and that's kind of an NFL model. The NFC South, as bad as they are, gets to send 1 team every year. And so I don't hate that idea. I know a lot of you hate Pate, but I thought that was a good one. So Tom Hannifan, Cole Thompson left us a little bit earlier. TJ Pittinger back for a longer edition of the Power 2 this week. But we will be.
Oh, wow, we went real long. Yeah,
we did, but it just kind of flows. So we'll be back next week. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you are locked in and subscribed, and we will see you guys soon.